The pistol pressed against Sarah Abbott's. Ribs felt colder than the December wind cutting through her thin dress. But the real chill came from recognizing her own brother's hand holding the weapon. "You will marry Edmund Hargrove tomorrow, or you will not see another sunrise," Thomas hissed, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air of their father's barn in Lusk, Wyoming, where she had foolishly agreed to meet him alone on this winter evening of 1883. Sarah's heart hammered against her corset as she stared into eyes that looked like her own, the same gray-blue that their mother had passed down before consumption took her 5 years ago. "Thomas, please, you cannot mean this." "Father means it. I am just the messenger." Thomas's voice cracked slightly, betraying the 18-year-old boy beneath the hardened facade he tried to project. "The Hargrove Ranch borders ours. It is the match that will save us from ruin. You know the debts we carry." She did know. Their father, Charles Abbott, had gambled away nearly everything at the card tables in Cheyenne, trying to recover losses that only compounded with each desperate attempt. The Abbott Ranch, once prosperous with 3,000 head of cattle, had dwindled to fewer than 500. The bank held papers on nearly every acre. Edmund Hargrove, a widower of 43 with cold eyes and a reputation for beating his horses, and his late wife, had offered to absorb their debts in exchange for Sarah's hand. "I will not do it," Sarah whispered, though her voice trembled. "I would rather die." "Then die you shall." Thomas pressed the gun harder against her ribs and she gasped. "But know that your death will not save him. Father has already sent men to deal with your cowboy. By morning, Marcus Vaughn will be found in a ditch with a bullet in his back, and everyone will believe the rumors that he was rustling cattle." The words struck her like physical blows. Marcus. Her Marcus, with his gentle hands and laughing eyes, who had drifted into Lusk 6 months ago looking for work, and had found employment on the neighboring Winters Ranch. They had met at the town dance in July, and within weeks, Sarah had known with absolute certainty that she wanted no other man for the rest of her days. "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "Thomas, you cannot let Father do this. I have no choice." But his hand wavered and the gun dropped slightly. "Neither do you. Marry Hargrove. Forget the drifter. Save our family name." "Our family name." Sarah felt something break inside her, some final thread of obedience that had been fraying for months. "Our name means nothing if it is built on forced marriage and murder. If Father would kill an innocent man to preserve his pride, then our honor is already dead." She shoved Thomas hard, catching him off guard. The gun clattered to the frozen ground, and Sarah ran. She burst from the barn into the bitter December night, her dress whipping around her legs as she raced across the yard. Behind her, Thomas shouted, but she did not stop. She ran past the main house where lamplight glowed in her father's study, past the empty paddocks, toward the road that led east to the Winters Ranch. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and Sarah's breath came in painful gasps as the cold air burned her lungs. She had no coat, no gloves, nothing but the thin wool dress she wore and the determination that Marcus must be warned. The road stretched before her, barely visible in the starlight, winding through open prairie dotted with patches of snow. She had covered perhaps half a mile when she heard the thunder of hooves behind her. Panic seized her throat. They were coming. Her father's men, or Thomas, or perhaps even Charles Abbott himself. She left the road, stumbling across the rough ground, heading toward a line of cottonwoods that marked the course of a frozen creek. "Sarah." The voice that called her name was not her brother's. It was deeper, rougher, and it made her legs nearly buckle with relief. She spun around, and there he was. Marcus Vaughn sat astride his gray gelding, his broad-brimmed hat shadowing his face, but she would know his silhouette anywhere. 24 years old, tall and lean with the build of a man who had spent his life working with horses and cattle. He swung down from the saddle before the horse had fully stopped and caught Sarah as her legs finally gave way. "Sarah, what has happened?" His arms were strong around her, his coat rough against her cheek as she pressed her face against his chest. "You are freezing. Here." He stripped off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth and the scent of him, leather and sage and wood smoke, made her want to weep. "They are going to kill you," she gasped out. "My father has sent men. Thomas told me. They will make it look like you were rustling cattle." "Marcus, you have to run, tonight, now." She felt him stiffen against her. "Slow down, tell me everything." The words spilled out in a rush as she explained the ultimatum, the gun, the threat. Marcus listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each sentence. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on her shoulders. "I will not run," he said finally. "You must. They will kill you, then I will die." His voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact. "But I will not leave you to face this alone, and I will not let them force you into a marriage with a man like Hargrove. Marcus, please." She gripped his shirt, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fabric. "I cannot lose you." He cupped her face in his hands, tilting her head up so she had to meet his eyes. Even in the darkness, she could see the intensity there. "You will not lose me. We will face this together." He paused, and something shifted in his expression. "Sarah Abbott, I have loved you since the moment you smiled at me across that dance floor in July. I have nothing to offer you but a horse, a saddle, and these 2 hands. But if you will have me, I swear I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Choose you." Her voice broke. "Marcus, there is no choice. It has always been you." He kissed her then, and despite the cold and the fear and the danger racing toward them on horseback, Sarah felt warmth spread through her entire body. His lips were gentle at first, then more urgent, as if he were trying to memorize the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she could see the determination in his face. "Then we leave. Tonight. Right now." He glanced back toward the road, where the sound of approaching riders was growing louder. "Can you ride?" Yes. She had grown up on horseback, though her father had forbidden her from riding anywhere alone after Marcus had begun courting her. "Good." Marcus whistled sharply, and his gelding trotted over. He helped Sarah into the saddle, then swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to grip the reins. "Hold tight to me." They rode hard into the darkness, leaving the road and cutting across open country. The horses' hooves pounded against the frozen ground, and behind them, Sarah heard shouts as her father's men discovered she had escaped. Marcus urged the gelding faster, leaning low over its neck, his body sheltering Sarah from the worst of the wind. They rode for what felt like hours, though it could not have been more than one. Marcus seemed to know where he was going, guiding the horse with confidence even in the darkness. Finally, they crested a low hill, and Sarah saw lights in the distance. "The Winters Ranch," Marcus said in her ear. "We will be safe there." But as they descended toward the cluster of buildings, doubt crept into Sarah's mind. Would they truly be safe? Her father had influence throughout the county. Edmund Hargrove's wealth gave him even more. How long before men came looking for them? How long before Marcus paid for her defiance with his life? As if sensing her thoughts, Marcus's arms tightened around her. "Whatever comes, we face it together. I meant what I said, Sarah. I will not run, and I will not let them take you." They reached the ranch house, and Marcus called out. A moment later, the door opened, spilling yellow light across the yard. A man emerged, stocky and graying, with a weathered face and sharp eyes. William Winters, the ranch owner who had hired Marcus in June. "Vaughn, what in blazes?" Winters's gaze took in Sarah's disheveled appearance, the lack of a coat, the way she clung to Marcus. His expression hardened. "Inside. Both of you now." They dismounted, and Marcus kept one arm around Sarah as they hurried into the warmth of the house. A woman appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Mary Winters, William's wife, took one look at Sarah and immediately went to fetch blankets. "Sit." William pointed to the chairs near the fireplace. "And explain." Marcus did, his voice steady and clear. He left nothing out, from his courtship of Sarah to her father's debts to the ultimatum and the threat on his life. Sarah watched William's face as he listened, trying to gauge his reaction. The older man had always been fair with his workers, but this was different. This could bring trouble to his doorstep. When Marcus finished, William was silent for a long moment. Mary had returned with blankets and hot coffee, and she pressed a cup into Sarah's trembling hands. Finally, William spoke. "Your father is a fool, begging your pardon, Miss Abbott. But he is a dangerous fool with dangerous friends." He looked at Marcus. "You have worked for me for 6 months, and in that time you have proven yourself honest and capable. I do not believe in forcing women to marry against their will, and I do not believe in shooting men in the back for falling in love." Relief flooded through Sarah, so intense she felt dizzy. "But," William continued, "you cannot stay here. Charles Abbott will come looking, and when he does, I cannot lie to him. I have a wife and children of my own to protect." "I understand." Marcus nodded. "We will leave at first light. You will leave now." William rose and went to a desk in the corner, pulling out a sheet of paper and a pencil. "I have a brother in Deadwood, South Dakota. He runs a freight company there. Show him this letter and he will give you work." He scribbled quickly, then folded the paper and handed it to Marcus. "It is 3 days' hard ride north. Can you make it?" "Yes, sir. You will need supplies." William turned to his wife. "Mary, pack them food for the journey, warm clothes for the young lady." He pulled open another drawer and counted out several bills. "This is not charity. Consider it wages paid in advance for work you will do for my brother. He owes me a favor and I am calling it in." "Mr. Winters, I do not know how to thank you." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank me by staying alive and being happy." The older man's expression softened slightly. "And perhaps in a few years, when this has all blown over, send me a letter letting me know how you are faring." Mary worked quickly, packing saddlebags with dried beef, hardtack, coffee, and a small pot. She brought Sarah a heavy coat, wool trousers, and a shirt. "You cannot ride 3 days in a dress," she said practically. "Go change. The bedroom is just there." Sarah hesitated, glancing at Marcus. He gave her an encouraging nod and she went to change. The trousers felt strange after years in skirts, but they were warm and practical. When she emerged, Mary added a thick scarf and gloves. "You will need another horse," William was saying to Marcus. "Take the bay mare in the second stall. She is steady and strong, and this," he held out a rifle. "I pray you will not need it, but better to have it." "I will repay you for all of this," Marcus said quietly. "You will repay me by keeping that girl safe and treating her well." William's eyes were hard. "If I hear otherwise, Deadwood is not far enough to protect you from me." "You will never hear otherwise, sir. I swear it." Within the hour they were ready. Sarah felt strange in the borrowed clothes, but the warmth was welcome. Marcus had loaded both horses, and William walked them out to the barn. "Follow the North Star," he instructed. "Avoid the main roads for the first day. There are homesteads along the way where you can water the horses, but do not tell anyone your names or where you are headed. When you reach the Cheyenne River, follow it northeast until you see the Black Hills. Deadwood is in the northern hills. Ask for Nathan Winters on Main Street." They mounted up, Sarah on the bay mare, Marcus on his gray gelding. Sarah looked down at William and Mary, standing in the doorway of their house, and felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Go with God," Mary said softly. They rode into the darkness once more, heading north across the frozen prairie. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant, and Sarah wondered if she would ever see Lusk again. Behind them, they left everything she had ever known. Her father's house, her brother, the town where she had grown up. Ahead lay only uncertainty and the unknown. But Marcus rode beside her, and that made all the difference. The first night was the hardest. They rode for hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and anyone who might follow. Marcus finally called a halt when they reached a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter from the wind. There was no wood for a fire, so they huddled together beneath the overhang, wrapped in blankets, sharing body heat. "Are you afraid?" Sarah asked into the darkness. "Yes," Marcus admitted. "But not of what lies ahead. I am afraid of what might have happened if you had not run from that barn tonight. Afraid of the thought of you married to Hargrove, of never seeing you again." His arm tightened around her. "Everything else we can face. My father will not forgive this. Neither will Thomas. Do you regret it?" His voice was quiet, careful. Sarah thought about her father's house, the ranch where she had been born. She thought about her brother who had held a gun to her ribs. She thought about the future that had been planned for her, married to a man she despised, living a lie. "No," she said firmly. "I regret that it had to come to this. I regret that my family values their honor more than my happiness. But I do not regret choosing you, Marcus. I will never regret that." He kissed the top of her head, and they sat in silence, listening to the wind howl across the prairie. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, and they dozed fitfully, startling awake at every sound. Dawn came gray and cold. They ate a sparse breakfast of hardtack and jerky, then rode on. The landscape stretched endlessly before them, rolling hills of brown grass dusted with snow, broken by occasional stands of pine. They saw few signs of human habitation, just the vast emptiness of the territory. By midday, they reached a small creek, still flowing despite the cold. They watered the horses and refilled their canteens. Sarah's body ached from hours in the saddle, muscles protesting the unaccustomed exertion, but she said nothing. Marcus's face was drawn with exhaustion, but he kept scanning the horizon, always watchful. "You think they are following?" Sarah asked. "I would be surprised if they were not." Marcus helped her back onto her horse. "But we have a good lead and the ground is hard. We will be difficult to track." They pushed on through the afternoon. The temperature dropped as the sun sank lower, and Sarah pulled her scarf tighter around her face. Her hands ached with cold despite the gloves, and her feet had gone numb in her boots. As darkness fell, they spotted a homestead in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and perhaps hot food. Marcus hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. "We should stop," Sarah said. "The horses need rest, and so do we. It is dangerous if anyone comes asking questions. Then we will leave before they arrive. But Marcus, we cannot ride 3 days without rest. We will kill the horses and ourselves." He nodded slowly. "You are right, but we stay only a few hours." They approached the homestead cautiously. It was a small place, just a sod house with a barn and a corral. A man emerged as they rode up, rifle in hand but not raised. He was perhaps 30, with a weather-beaten face and suspicious eyes. "Help you folks," he called. "We are traveling to Deadwood," Marcus said, keeping his voice friendly. "Wondered if we might water our horses and warm ourselves for a spell. We can pay." The man studied them for a long moment, his gaze lingering on Sarah in her trousers and heavy coat. "You running from something, bad debts," Marcus said, which was not entirely a lie. Figure to start fresh up north. Another pause, then the man lowered his rifle. I know how that goes. Name is Frank Shepherd. Come on in. The wife will have supper ready shortly. They followed Frank into the small house where a woman worked at the stove. She turned as they entered, and her eyes widened at the sight of visitors. She was young, perhaps Sarah's own age of 20 years, with a tired but kind face. Sarah, the woman introduced herself, then laughed. That is funny. I am Susan Shepherd. Susan, meet Sarah. She gestured for them to sit at the rough table. You must be frozen clear through. Coffee, please, Sarah said gratefully. They sat, and Susan served them strong coffee and bowls of venison stew. It was simple fare, but after a day of hardtack and jerky, it tasted like a feast. Frank and Susan asked few questions, seeming to sense that their guests preferred not to share too many details. Instead, they talked about the harsh winter, the difficulty of farming in this country, their hope to build a larger house come spring. How long have you been married? Susan asked, glancing between Sarah and Marcus. Sarah froze, uncertain how to answer. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Not yet, he said quietly. We hope to find a preacher in Deadwood. It was not a lie, though they had not discussed it explicitly. But the moment Marcus said it, Sarah felt the rightness of it settle in her bones. Yes, that was what she wanted, to be his wife in truth, not just in her heart. Young love, Frank said, not unkindly. I remember that. Thought I would die when Susan's father said I was not good enough for her. What changed his mind? Marcus asked. I proved him wrong. Frank smiled at his wife. Worked every day for 2 years, saved every penny, bought this land. Went back and showed him I could provide for her. He still did not like it, but he could not say I had not tried. Some fathers cannot be convinced, Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly. Some men value pride over their children's happiness. Frank nodded slowly. That is a truth. Well, you folks are welcome to sleep in the barn if you like. It is warmer than the open prairie, and we have extra blankets. They accepted gratefully. After the meal, Susan pressed a packet of food into Sarah's hands. For the journey, and here. She added a thick pair of wool socks. Your feet will thank you. You are very kind, Sarah said, her eyes burning with unexpected tears. These strangers who had nothing were willing to share what little they had. We all need help sometimes, Susan said simply. Safe travels. They bedded down in the barn, burrowing into the hay with the blankets Susan had provided. It was warmer than the previous night, and Sarah felt herself relaxing for the first time in 2 days. Marcus, she whispered in the darkness. Yes. What you said in there about finding a preacher, did you mean it? She felt him shift beside her, propping himself up on one elbow. Sarah Abbott, are you asking me to marry you? Despite everything, she felt herself smile. I believe I am. Then I accept. He kissed her, slow and sweet. But I want to do this properly. When we reach Deadwood, when we are safe, I want to marry you in a church with you in a proper dress, not running and hiding like outlaws. I do not care about a proper dress. I just want to be your wife. And you will be. I promise you that. But you deserve better than a hurried ceremony in a barn. I deserve you, she said fiercely. Nothing else matters. They held each other in the darkness, listening to the horses moving in their stalls, the wind howling outside. Sarah felt a peace she had not expected to find, given the circumstances. She had left behind everything she had ever known, was being hunted by her own father, facing an uncertain future in a strange town. But with Marcus's arms around her, she felt safer than she ever had in her father's house. They rose before dawn and left quietly, not wanting to wake the shepherds. Back in the saddle, they continued north. The second day was colder than the first, the wind cutting through even their heavy coats. They saw antelope in the distance, a small herd of buffalo but no other people. The emptiness was both comforting and unsettling. By evening they reached the Cheyenne River, just as William Winters had described. It flowed dark and swift between banks lined with bare cottonwoods. They made camp among the trees, and Marcus finally risked a small fire. The warmth was glorious, and they sat close together, heating coffee and roasting the last of the dried beef. "Tell me about Deadwood," Sarah said. "Have you been there before?" "Once, a few years back. It is a mining town, rough and rowdy. Lots of prospectors and gamblers, saloons and dance halls." "Not the most refined place," he glanced at her. "I am sorry I cannot offer you somewhere better." "I do not need refined, I need safe." She leaned against his shoulder. "And I need you. You have me. Forever, if you will have me that long. Forever sounds about right." The third day dawned clear and bitterly cold. They followed the river northeast, and by midday they could see the Black Hills rising in the distance, dark pine forests against the pale winter sky. The sight lifted Sarah's spirits. They were almost there, almost safe. They reached Deadwood as the sun was setting on the third day. The town sprawled through a narrow gulch, buildings packed tightly together, smoke rising from countless chimneys. Even in the cold, the streets were busy with miners and merchants, horses and wagons. Music and laughter spilled from the saloons, and Sarah felt overwhelmed by the noise and activity after 3 days of near solitude. Marcus led them to a livery stable, where they arranged to board the horses. Then, with his saddlebags over his shoulder and the letter from William Winters in his pocket, he asked directions to the freight company. They found it on Main Street, a large warehouse with wagons lined up outside. A sign over the door read, "Winters Freight and Delivery." Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand, then pushed open the door. Inside, the space was organized chaos. Crates and barrels were stacked everywhere, and several men were loading a wagon. A man stood near the back, checking items off a list. He looked up as they entered, and Sarah saw the family resemblance immediately. He had William Winters's sharp eyes and stocky build, though his hair was darker. "Help you," he called. "Are you Nathan Winters?" Marcus asked. "I am." The man set down his list and walked over. "You are." "Marcus Vaughn. Your brother William sent me." Marcus held out the letter. Nathan took it, his eyebrows rising as he read. When he looked up, his expression had shifted from mild curiosity to sharp interest. "So you are the young fool who ran off with Charles Abbott's daughter." Sarah's heart sank. "You know about that? Word travels fast, even in winter. Got a telegram from my brother 3 days ago, warning me you might be coming and asking me to help." Nathan folded the letter carefully. "Also got a visit yesterday from 2 men asking if anyone had seen a young woman and a cowboy traveling together. I told them I had not seen anyone matching that description." "But you will help us?" Marcus asked carefully. "My brother vouches for you, and I trust his judgment. Plus, I do not much care for men who force their daughters into unwanted marriages." Nathan looked at Sarah. "You really Charles Abbott's girl?" "I was," Sarah said quietly. "I am not certain what I am now. You are a young woman trying to make her own choices, seems to me." "Cannot fault you for that." Nathan tucked the letter into his pocket. "All right, here is how this will work. Vaughn, you will work for me hauling freight. The pay is decent and the work is steady. You," he pointed at Sarah. "What can you do?" "I can keep books," Sarah said. "I manage the household accounts for my father's ranch. I can read and write and do figures." Nathan's eyes lit up. "Can you really? My last bookkeeper ran off to the gold fields last month, and I have been drowning in paperwork ever since. If you can organize this mess, the job is yours." Relief washed through Sarah. Work, both of them with honest work and income. It was more than she had dared hope for. "There is one problem," Nathan continued. You will need a place to stay, and this town being what it is, a young, unmarried woman living alone or with a man who is not her husband will attract exactly the kind of attention you do not want. Folks here do not ask too many questions, but they notice things. We plan to marry, Marcus said firmly. As soon as possible. Good. There is a preacher at the Methodist church on the north end of town, Reverend James. He is a decent man, not too fussy about paperwork. Go see him tonight, get married tomorrow. Once you are properly wed, you can rent the room above the warehouse. It is small, but it is warm and dry. I will take the first month's rent out of your wages. Thank you, Sarah breathed. Thank you so much. Thank my brother. He called in a big favor for you too. Nathan returned to his work. Now get out of here and go find that preacher before it gets any later. Report for work the day after tomorrow. That will give you a day to get settled. They found the Methodist church easily enough, a simple white building at the edge of town. The preacher, Reverend James, was a thin man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He listened to their story without interrupting, and when Marcus finished, he nodded slowly. I will marry you tomorrow afternoon, he said. I will need witnesses, but I can provide those. Do you have rings? No, sir, Marcus admitted. We have plain bands that we keep for occasions such as this. You can repay me when you are able. The Reverend smiled. Young lady, do you come to this marriage of your own free will without coercion? Yes, Sarah said firmly. Absolutely yes. And you, young man, do you promise to honor and care for this woman, to be faithful to her, and to build a life with her? I do, sir, with everything I am. Then I will see you both tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Wear your best clothes and come with open hearts. They left the church in a daze. It was happening. Tomorrow Sarah would become Marcus's wife, not as Sarah Abbott, daughter of a rancher, but as herself. Her own person, making her own choice. They found a modest hotel and rented 2 rooms, side by side. It was an extravagance they could barely afford, but propriety seemed important now, on the eve of their wedding. Marcus walked Sarah to her door and kissed her goodnight. Tomorrow, he said softly, tomorrow you will be my wife. I already am in every way that matters. Tomorrow it will be official, legal. Tomorrow no one can separate us. Sarah reached up and cupped his face in her hands. Marcus Vaughn, I love you. I loved you when I ran from my father's barn. I loved you when we rode through the freezing night. I loved you every moment of these 3 days, and I will love you every day for the rest of my life. His eyes glittered with emotion. Sarah Abbott, you are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known. I do not deserve you, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. They kissed one last time, long and sweet, before reluctantly parting. Sarah closed the door of her room and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Tomorrow everything would change. She slept fitfully that night, dreams mixing with reality. She dreamed of her father's angry face, of Thomas holding the gun, of Edmund Hargrove reaching for her with cruel hands. But she also dreamed of Marcus, of his smile, of the life they would build together. Morning came bright and cold. Sarah woke with nervous energy singing through her veins. She had nothing to wear but the borrowed trousers and shirt, and suddenly she desperately wanted something better for her wedding day. It seemed foolish, after everything, to care about such things. But she did. There was a knock at her door, and when she opened it, she found a package wrapped in brown paper on the floor. She brought it inside and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a dress, simple but clean, made of deep blue wool. There was a note in Marcus's handwriting. Saw this in a shop window. The shopkeeper said it might fit. You do not have to wear it if you do not want to, but I thought you might like to have something new for today. Sarah held the dress up, her eyes stinging with tears. It was perfect. Not fancy, not the elaborate gown she might have worn if she had married Edmund Hargrove, but honest and practical and beautiful in its simplicity. She washed carefully with the cold water in the basin, then put on the dress. It fit reasonably well, perhaps a bit loose in the waist, but nothing that could not be adjusted later. She brushed her hair until it shone, then braided it and pinned it up. When she looked in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked older somehow and different. Not a rancher's daughter anymore, but a woman who had made her own choices and was prepared to face the consequences. At 1:45, Marcus knocked on her door. When she opened it, his face went still with wonder. "Sarah," he breathed, "you are beautiful." He looked different too. He had shaved and gotten a haircut, and he wore a clean shirt and trousers, a borrowed jacket that was a bit too big in the shoulders. In his hand, he held a small bunch of flowers, pine boughs and winter berries, the best he had been able to find in December. "These are for you," he said, suddenly shy. Sarah took them, blinking back tears. "They are lovely, thank you, and thank you for the dress. I wanted you to have something special. I know this is not the wedding you probably imagined. This is exactly the wedding I want. Because it is ours and it is real." They walked to the church together through the cold afternoon. The streets were busy, but Sarah barely noticed the activity around them. Her whole world had narrowed to the man beside her, the church ahead, the vows they were about to make. Reverend James was waiting for them, along with 2 witnesses he had recruited, an older couple who sang in the church choir. The church was empty otherwise, quiet and peaceful. Sunlight streamed through the simple windows, casting patterns on the wooden floor. "Are you ready?" the Reverend asked. "Yes," they said together. The ceremony was simple, the traditional words that countless couples had spoken before them. But when Sarah looked into Marcus's eyes and promised to love and honor him for the rest of her days, she meant every word with an intensity that shook her to her core. And when Marcus slipped the plain gold band onto her finger and called her his wife, she felt something inside her settle and root deep. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend James said with a smile. "You may kiss your bride." Marcus cupped Sarah's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. The witnesses applauded softly, and when they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. They signed the marriage certificate, and Reverend James gave them a copy. "Keep this safe," he advised. "You may need it someday to prove your marriage is legal." They thanked him profusely and left the church as the sun was beginning to set. The room above the warehouse was waiting for them, but neither was ready to go there yet. Instead, they walked through Deadwood hand in hand, just being together. "Mrs. Vaughn," Marcus said, testing out the name. "Sarah Vaughn, I like the sound of that. So do I." She squeezed his hand. "I was thinking we should send a letter to William and Mary Winters, letting them know we arrived safely and are married. That is a good idea, and perhaps someday we will have news worth sharing." "What kind of news?" "Oh, I do not know. That we have saved enough money to buy our own place. That we have children running around, that we are happy and thriving." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, I know these past days have been hard. I know you have given up so much. Your family, your home, the life you knew. And I want you to know that I do not take that lightly. I will work every day to make sure you never regret choosing me. I have told you before, Marcus, I will never regret it." She stepped closer to him, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "You said once that honor means nothing without love to guard. My father has his honor, his pride, his precious family name, but he does not have love. He does not have what we have. What do we have? Everything that matters, each other, freedom, a future we get to build ourselves." They returned to the warehouse as full darkness fell. Nathan had left the key on a hook just inside the door, along with another note. "Congratulations. See you in 2 days. Enjoy your honeymoon." The room above the warehouse was exactly as Nathan had described it. Small, just large enough for a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a wardrobe. But it was clean and warm, with a window that looked out over the street. Someone, probably Nathan or one of his workers, had left supplies. Coffee and sugar, bread and butter, dried meat, even a bottle of wine. Marcus lit the lamp and the stove while Sarah explored their new home. It was not much, but it was theirs. No one could tell them to leave. No one could separate them. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly free. They made a simple dinner of bread and meat, drinking the wine by lamplight. They talked for hours, making plans for the future. Marcus would work hard at the freight company, proving himself reliable. Sarah would organize the books and accounts. They would save money, every penny they could spare. Eventually, maybe in a few years, they would have enough to buy land, start their own ranch. Someplace far enough from Lusk that her father's reach could not touch them. "You think they are still looking for us?" Sarah asked. "Probably, but they will not find us here. Nathan is protecting us, and in a town like Deadwood, people know how to mind their own business." "I hope you are right. Even if I am not, even if they do find us, I will not let them take you back. You are my wife now. That is a bond no one can break." Later, as they lay together in the narrow bed, Sarah felt Marcus's hand find hers in the darkness. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what? For choosing me, for trusting me, for running with me into the unknown. Thank you for giving me something worth running toward." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, warm and safe and together. And for that night, at least, the world and all its dangers seemed very far away. The next 2 months passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Marcus took to the freight business quickly, proving himself strong and dependable. He hauled goods from Deadwood to the surrounding mining camps, often gone for 2 or 3 days at a time. Sarah missed him terribly when he was away, but she kept herself busy with the accounting. Nathan had not been exaggerating about the state of his books. It took Sarah nearly 2 weeks just to sort through the chaos of receipts and invoices, organizing them into a system that made sense. But once she had, she discovered that Nathan's business was more profitable than even he had realized. She showed him the numbers one afternoon, pointing out where he was losing money on certain routes and where he could raise his prices. "You have a good head for this," Nathan said, impressed. "William told me you were smart, but this is excellent work. Thank you." Sarah felt a glow of pride. She had always enjoyed working with numbers, but her father had dismissed it as unfeminine. Here, her skills were valued. As winter gave way to early spring, Sarah and Marcus settled into a rhythm. They were happy, despite the modest circumstances. They had each other, they had work, they had a future. Marcus brought home his wages and Sarah added hers, and slowly their savings began to grow. In April, Sarah realized she had not bled for 2 months. At first, she thought it was the stress of the past months, the upheaval and change. But when the nausea began, striking her each morning with relentless intensity, she knew. She was carrying Marcus's child. The knowledge filled her with a complex tangle of emotions. Joy, because she wanted this, wanted to build a family with Marcus. Fear, because she had no mother to guide her, no female relatives to turn to for advice. And a deep, aching sadness because her child would never know its grandfather or uncle, would grow up severed from half its family tree. She told Marcus that evening when he returned from a run to lead. He had just set down his saddlebags when she blurted out the news, unable to contain it any longer. "I am with child." He froze, his eyes going wide. "You are certain?" "Yes. I am 2 months along, maybe more." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a grin spread across his face, so wide and joyful that Sarah felt her own worries ease. He crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We are having a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Sarah, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could see that he was. "Happy. I am over the moon. This is the best news I have ever received in my life." He set her down gently, suddenly cautious. "Are you feeling all right? Should you be working? Do you need to see a doctor?" "I am fine. Just sick in the mornings, but I am told that is normal." She smiled at his concern. "We have time. The baby will not come until October from what I can figure." "October." Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "By October we will be in a better place. I will make sure of it. You and our child will have everything you need." He kept that promise. Over the following months, Marcus worked harder than ever, taking extra runs, saving every penny. Sarah continued with the bookkeeping as long as she was able, though as summer progressed and her belly swelled, Nathan insisted she reduce her hours. "You need to rest," he said firmly. "The books can wait. Your health cannot." By August, Sarah had to admit he was right. The heat of summer in Deadwood was oppressive, and the baby seemed to be growing at an alarming rate. She tired easily, her back ached constantly, and she spent most of her time in the relative cool of the room above the warehouse. Marcus was attentive and loving, bringing her treats from town, rubbing her sore feet, reading to her in the evenings. They talked endlessly about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the life they would give their child. "I want our son to grow up knowing he is loved," Marcus said one evening in late August. "Not just by us, but by himself. I want him to be confident and kind and brave." "What if it is a daughter?" Sarah asked. "Then I want her to grow up knowing she can make her own choices, just like her mother did. I want her to be strong and smart and unafraid." "Those are good wants," Sarah said softly, resting her hand on her belly where the baby kicked and rolled. "I think we will manage it." September brought cooler weather and a new worry. Sarah's time was approaching, and she was terrified. Women died in childbirth all the time, out here on the frontier where doctors were scarce and medical care primitive. She tried not to think about it, but as October drew closer, the fear gnawed at her. Marcus must have sensed her worry because he came home one evening with a woman in tow. She was perhaps 40, with graying hair and capable hands, dressed in practical clothing. "Sarah, this is Mrs. Ellen Ridge. She is a midwife. I have arranged for her to attend you when the time comes." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Ellen Ridge examined her with brisk efficiency, declaring that Sarah was healthy and the baby was positioned well. "You have good hips for birthing," she said matter-of-factly. "I do not foresee any problems. Just rest, eat well, and send for me when your pains begin." The baby came on a cold October night, 2 weeks earlier than Sarah had expected. She woke to cramping pain, and within an hour, it was clear this was not false labor. Marcus ran through the dark streets to fetch Mrs. Ridge, returning with the midwife in less than 20 minutes. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Sarah clung to Marcus's hand, squeezing until she thought she might break his fingers. He never once complained, just wiped her forehead with a cool cloth and whispered encouragement. "You can do this, Sarah. You are the strongest woman I know, just a bit longer." When the baby finally came, just as the sun was setting on October 15th, Sarah was exhausted beyond measure. But when Mrs. Ridge placed the tiny, squalling infant on her chest, every bit of pain vanished. "A son," the midwife announced. "Strong and healthy. Well done, Mrs. Vaughn." Sarah looked down at the baby, his face red and wrinkled, his tiny hands waving in the air, and felt love so fierce it nearly stopped her heart. Marcus leaned over them both, his eyes wet with tears. "He is perfect," Marcus breathed. "Sarah, you did it. He is perfect." "Matthew," Sarah said suddenly. "His name is Matthew, Matthew Charles Vaughn." She looked up at Marcus. "Charles for my father, even though we are estranged, he is still family." "Matthew Charles Vaughn," Marcus repeated. "I like it. Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the world, son." The baby's cry quieted as if recognizing his father's voice. Sarah watched Marcus reach out a tentative finger, and Matthew's tiny hand closed around it instinctively. The expression on Marcus's face was one of such pure wonder and love that Sarah felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. Mrs. Ridge stayed for another hour, making sure Sarah was comfortable and showing her how to nurse the baby. When she finally left, she promised to return the next day to check on them both. Alone with his new family, Marcus seemed reluctant to leave Sarah's side even for a moment. He pulled a chair close to the bed and just watched her with Matthew. "I cannot believe he is real," Marcus said softly. "I mean, I knew you were pregnant, I felt him kick. But seeing him, holding him, it makes it all so much more real." "We made a person," Sarah said, marveling at the impossibility of it. "A whole new human being who will have his own thoughts and dreams and life. And he will never know what it is like to have his future dictated to him by others. He will grow up free to make his own choices." Over the following weeks, they adjusted to life with a newborn. Matthew was a good baby, mostly sleeping and eating, but when he cried in the night, it was Marcus who often rose to walk with him, singing soft, off-key lullabies until the baby settled. Sarah watched her husband become a father and fell in love with him all over again. He was gentle and patient, never frustrated by the crying or the disrupted sleep. He changed diapers without complaint and took over all the cooking so Sarah could rest and recover. Nathan gave Marcus 2 weeks off work to be with his family, refusing to dock his pay. "You have earned it," he said gruffly when Marcus tried to protest. "Take care of your wife and son." By November, Sarah was up and around again, stronger each day. Matthew was thriving, growing visibly, his eyes beginning to focus and follow movement. They took him out for short walks when the weather permitted, bundled in blankets, and Sarah loved watching Marcus point out things to their son as if the baby could understand. "See that, Matthew? That is a horse. You will learn to ride someday, and that is a wagon. Your papa drives one of those for work." As winter closed in once more, Sarah found herself thinking often about Lusk. It had been almost a year since they had fled into the night. Did her father ever think of her? Did Thomas? Did they wonder if she was alive, if she was happy, if she regretted her choice? She had no regrets. Not one. Looking at Marcus teaching Matthew to grasp a rattle, hearing her husband's laughter, feeling the warmth of their small family, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. Her father had his honor, his pride, his ranch. She had love, and she would choose love every single time. In December, a letter arrived addressed to Marcus. It was from William Winters, the first communication they had received from anyone in Lusk. Sarah's hands trembled as Marcus opened it. The letter was brief but contained news that made Sarah's heart clench. Her father had died in September, thrown from a horse and breaking his neck. The Abbott ranch had been sold to pay debts. Thomas had married and moved to Cheyenne. Edmund Hargrove had remarried, a widow from Laramie. "My father is dead," Sarah said, the words strange in her mouth. She felt oddly numb. She had not seen Charles Abbott in a year, had not spoken to him in even longer, but he was still her father, and knowing he was gone left a hollow ache in her chest. Marcus pulled her close. "I am sorry, Sarah." "I am not," she said, then immediately felt guilty for the lie. "Or maybe I am. I do not know what I feel. He would have killed you. He would have forced me to marry Hargrove, but he was still my father. You are allowed to mourn him, even after everything. He never met his grandson." Matthew will never know his grandfather. Sarah looked down at the baby sleeping in his cradle. That feels wrong somehow, even though I know it could not have been any other way. Matthew will know he is loved. That is what matters. And maybe someday, if your brother reaches out, we can make peace. Not for your father's sake, but for Matthew's. Every child deserves to know their family if it is possible. It was a generous thought, and Sarah held on to it. But months passed with no word from Thomas, and eventually she accepted that the rift between them might never heal. She had chosen her path, and Thomas had chosen his. That was just how life went sometimes. The years rolled by, marked by Matthew's growth and development. He was a bright child, curious and energetic, inheriting his mother's quick mind and his father's easy smile. By the time he was 3, he was talking in full sentences and following Marcus around like a shadow, wanting to help with everything. Marcus and Sarah's hard work paid off. By 1886, they had saved enough to make a down payment on a small property just outside Deadwood. It was not much, just 10 acres with a modest house, but it was theirs. They moved in the spring, and Sarah cried as she stood in her own kitchen in her own home for the first time. "We did it," she said, turning to Marcus. "We actually did it." "You did it," he corrected. "You were brave enough to run, to trust me, to build this life with me. This is all because of you." They added chickens and a milk cow, and Marcus built a small barn for the horses. Sarah planted a garden, teaching Matthew which plants were vegetables and which were weeds. It was a simple life, but it was good. Better than good. It was everything she had never known she wanted. In the summer of 1887, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. Matthew, now nearly 4, was excited at the prospect of a sibling. "Will it be a brother or sister?" he asked, his hand on Sarah's belly. "We will not know until the baby comes," Sarah said. "Which would you prefer?" "A brother," Matthew decided, "so we can play together." But when the baby arrived in March of 1888, it was a girl. They named her Emma Grace, and Matthew fell in love with his baby sister immediately, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to feeding. Marcus proved just as devoted to Emma as he was to Matthew, cradling his daughter with the same tenderness he had shown their son. "2 children," he marveled. "We have 2 beautiful, healthy children. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Sarah said. "Though I am not sure luck is the right word. We made our own fortune, Marcus. We chose each other, and everything good that came after was because of that choice." As Emma grew from infant to toddler, the family settled into a comfortable routine. Marcus still worked for Nathan, though he had been promoted to manager, overseeing the other drivers. Sarah kept the books from home now, balancing the ledgers while watching the children play. They saved what they could, slowly expanding their property, adding more animals, building a larger barn. In 1890, Matthew started school in Deadwood, walking into town each morning with his lunch pail and his slate. He was bright and eager to learn, and his teacher reported that he was at the top of his class. Sarah felt fierce pride watching her son grow into a kind, intelligent boy. Emma was different from her brother, more willful and independent. By the age of 3, she had decided opinions about everything and was not afraid to share them. She would rather be outside helping Marcus with the horses than inside learning to sew or cook. Sarah let her daughter forge her own path, remembering what it felt like to have choices made for her. One evening in the fall of 1891, after the children were asleep, Sarah and Marcus sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the Black Hills. They did this often, these quiet moments together at the end of the day. "You ever regret it?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Leaving everything you knew, choosing me over your family?" Sarah did not even have to think about her answer. "Not for one single moment. I told you once, Marcus." I will never regret choosing you. Everything good in my life, everything I treasure came from that choice. I think about it sometimes, Marcus admitted. That night you ran from your father's barn, if you had not been brave enough to run, if you had given in and married Hargrove. Sometimes I lie awake at night and think about how close we came to losing each other. But we did not lose each other. We are here together with two incredible children and a life we built ourselves. She reached for his hand. Your father wanted me to marry for his honor, for his pride, for his debts. But honor means nothing if it is built on someone else's misery. You said that to me once. You said honor means nothing without love to guard. Do you remember? I remember. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You taught me that real honor is keeping your promises to the people you love. It is being faithful and true and present. It is working hard to build something good. You have more honor in your little finger than my father had in his entire body. Marcus squeezed her hand. Thank you for choosing me, Sarah. Thank you for seeing something in a drifter cowboy that was worth running toward. Thank you for being worth it. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, the land they had worked for and earned stretched in all directions. It was not a large property, and they were not wealthy. But they had built something real and lasting, something that could not be taken away. In 1893, Sarah received a letter from an unexpected source. It was from Thomas, her brother, whom she had not heard from since fleeing Lusk nearly 10 years earlier. Her hands shook as she opened it. The letter was stilted and awkward, but the message was clear. Thomas had a daughter now, and becoming a father had changed him. He understood, finally, why Sarah had run. He understood the desperation to protect one's child, to want them to have a better life. He was sorry for threatening her, sorry for supporting their father's plans. He wanted to know if there was any possibility of reconciliation. Sarah read the letter twice, then handed it to Marcus. He read it carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I do not know," Sarah admitted. "Part of me wants to tell him it is too late, that he made his choice and I made mine. But another part of me remembers the brother I grew up with before father twisted him up with talk of duty and honor. And there is Matthew and Emma to consider," Marcus said. "They have an uncle and a cousin they have never met. That is their family too." In the end, Sarah wrote back. The letter took her 3 days to compose, weighing each word carefully. She told Thomas about her life, about Marcus and the children, about the home they had built. She told him she was willing to correspond, to see if trust could be rebuilt. But she was firm that she had no regrets about her choices, and she would not tolerate any criticism of Marcus or their marriage. Thomas's response came 6 weeks later. It was warmer this time, less formal. He shared stories about his daughter, 3-year-old Rebecca, and his wife, Anna. He asked questions about Matthew and Emma, about their lives in Deadwood. He made no mention of their father or the past, focusing instead on the present and future. Over the following years, letters went back and forth between Deadwood and Cheyenne. Slowly, carefully, Sarah and Thomas rebuilt their relationship. It would never be what it had been before, but it was something. A tentative connection, a bridge across the chasm that had divided them. In the summer of 1895, Thomas and his family made the journey to Deadwood to visit. It was awkward at first, both sides uncertain how to act, but the children broke the ice, as children often do. Matthew, now 12, took his 8-year-old cousin Rebecca on a tour of the property, showing her the horses and chickens with pride. Emma, 7 and fearless, insisted that Rebecca climb trees with her. Watching his children play with their cousin, watching Sarah talk with her brother, Marcus felt a deep sense of contentment. They had done it. They had built a life, raised a family, created something lasting and good. And they had done it together. Two people who had chosen love over convenience, over safety, over the expectations of others. That evening, after Thomas and his family had left for their hotel in town, Sarah found Marcus in the barn, checking on the horses one last time before bed. "Thank you," she said, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "For what?" "For being patient with Thomas today, for welcoming him and his family. I know it could not have been easy given the history." Marcus turned in her arms, pulling her close. "It was not easy, but it was right. He is your brother, and he is trying to make amends. That takes courage, and Matthew and Emma deserve to know their family. You are a good man, Marcus Vaughn. I am a man who loves his wife and will do anything to make her happy." He kissed her forehead. "If welcoming your brother into our home makes you happy, then it was worth any discomfort I felt." They stood together in the quiet barn, the horses shifting in their stalls, the night sounds of the prairie drifting through the open door. 23 years old when they met, now in their 30s, they had lived an entire lifetime together. And with luck and God's grace, they would live many more lifetimes still. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Matthew graduated from school and went to work for Nathan Winters, following in his father's footsteps. Emma proved to have a gift with horses and began training them, earning money from neighboring ranchers who valued her skill. In 1899, Marcus and Sarah celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary. They had survived poverty, exile, the death of Sarah's father, the challenges of raising children on the frontier. Their love had not diminished with time. If anything, it had grown deeper, more complex, rooted in shared history and mutual respect. That summer, Thomas and Anna moved to Deadwood with their family, now grown to include 3 children. Thomas went into business with Nathan Winters, and the two families saw each other regularly. The wounds of the past had not fully healed, perhaps never would, but they had been bandaged and tended. Thomas never spoke of their father or that night in the barn. Sarah did not bring it up either. Some things were better left in the past. By the turn of the century, Matthew was 22 and courting a young woman named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. Emma, at 19, had a line of suitors but showed no interest in settling down, preferring to work with horses and dream of starting her own training business. Marcus's hair had started to gray at the temples, and Sarah found lines around her eyes when she looked in the mirror. They were not young anymore, not the desperate fugitives who had fled into the winter night so many years ago. They were respectable members of the community, property owners, parents to successful children. But when Marcus looked at Sarah, he still saw the brave young woman who had chosen him over everything else. And when Sarah looked at Marcus, she still saw the cowboy who had taught her that honor means nothing without love to guard. In the spring of 1902, Matthew married Elizabeth in the Methodist Church, the same church where his parents had wed 19 years earlier. Marcus walked his son to the altar with tears in his eyes, and Sarah wept openly watching her boy become a man. The reception was held at Marcus and Sarah's property, with food and music and dancing that lasted until well after dark. At one point, Marcus pulled Sarah onto the makeshift dance floor and they swayed together under the stars. "Remember our wedding," Marcus murmured in her ear. "Just the two of us and the Reverend and his witnesses. I remember. It was perfect. This is nice too, though. Seeing our son so happy, surrounded by friends and family. Knowing he gets to choose his own path, his own love." "We did that," Sarah said softly. "We broke the cycle. Matthew will never force his children into unwanted marriages. Emma will never be sold to the highest bidder. We gave them freedom. We gave them love. That is more important than any inheritance or land or money. We gave them love and taught them they are worthy of it." They danced until the musicians packed up their instruments, until the last guest had left, until it was just the two of them standing in their yard under a sky full of stars. "I would do it all again," Sarah said suddenly. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every sacrifice. I would do it all again in a heartbeat to end up here with you. So would I." Marcus kissed her, slow and deep, a kiss that held 19 years of love and commitment and shared history. "So would I." As the years rolled toward 1905, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Matthew and Elizabeth had 2 children of their own now, making Marcus and Sarah grandparents. Emma finally fell in love with a veterinarian from Rapid City and married in a small ceremony in 1904. The property had grown to 50 acres, and Marcus had hired hands to help with the work. Sarah still kept the books for Nathan, though she did most of the work from home now. Marcus still drove freight occasionally, though he left most of the long hauls to younger men. They had earned their ease, earned the right to slow down and enjoy the fruits of their labor. One evening in late summer of 1905, Marcus and Sarah walked their property as the sun set, a ritual they had performed countless times over the years. They walked hand in hand, pointing out changes, discussing plans for the future, simply enjoying being together. 22 years, Marcus said as they stood on a small rise overlooking their land. 22 years since we got married, 23 since we met. Best 23 years of my life, Sarah said without hesitation. Mine too. He put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night we fled? You said you would rather die than marry Hargrove." "I remember. I meant it. I know you did. And I remember thinking that I would die before I let them force you into that marriage. I would have faced down your father, your brother, Hargrove himself. I would have done anything to protect you. And you did. You saved me, Marcus." "No." He turned to face her, his hands on her shoulders. "You saved yourself, you ran, you chose. You were brave enough to leave everything you knew for an uncertain future with a drifter cowboy. I just gave you something to run toward." "We saved each other," Sarah said firmly. "You gave me the courage to choose, and I gave you a reason to stay. That is what love is, Marcus. 2 people making each other braver and stronger and better." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Around them, their land stretched in all directions, hard-won and well-earned. Inside the house, lamps glowed warm against the gathering darkness, a beacon of home and safety. Sarah had left behind her father's ranch, her family name, the life that had been planned for her. She had chosen love over duty, freedom over obligation, her own path over the one others had tried to force her down. And standing here, in the twilight of a summer evening, with Marcus's arms around her and a lifetime of love behind them, Sarah knew she had chosen correctly. Her father had died believing that honor was everything, that family name and reputation mattered more than individual happiness. But he had died alone, estranged from his daughter, never knowing his grandchildren, his legacy sold off to pay gambling debts. Sarah's legacy was different. Her legacy was 2 strong, independent children who knew they were loved unconditionally. Her legacy was grandchildren who would grow up knowing they could choose their own paths. Her legacy was a marriage built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not convenience or commerce. Her legacy was proving that honor means nothing without love to guard it. As they walked back to the house, the stars beginning to emerge overhead, Marcus squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How grateful I am, how lucky I am. I am the lucky one. We are both lucky. We found each other against all odds. We built this life together. We raised children and created a home and survived everything the world threw at us." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Marcus Vaughn, I love you more today than I did the day we married. And I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you for all the days we have left." His eyes were bright with emotion. "Sarah Vaughn, you are the love of my life, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. There is nothing I would not do for you, nowhere I would not follow you. That is my promise to you until death parts us." They sealed their promises with a kiss, then walked the rest of the way to the house. Inside, the lamps were warm and welcoming. The photographs on the walls showed their family, their history, their love. The furniture they had saved for and bought piece by piece. The dishes Sarah had chosen, the quilt on the bed she had sewn herself. Every item told a story. Every corner held a memory. This was their home, built by their own hands, filled with their own love. That night, lying in bed with Marcus's arms around her, Sarah thought about the girl she had been 23 years ago. Frightened and desperate, running through the frozen night with no clear destination, only the certainty that she could not live the life her father had planned for her. That girl would hardly recognize the woman Sarah had become. Strong, confident, successful in her own right. A wife, a mother, a grandmother. A woman who had made her own choices and lived with the consequences, good and bad. If she could go back and speak to that terrified girl running through the darkness, what would she say? She would say that it was worth it. Every hard moment, every sacrifice, every fear. It was all worth it for the life waiting on the other side. She would say that love is stronger than duty, that happiness matters more than reputation, that a life chosen is better than a life imposed. She would say that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Choose your own path. Choose the person who makes you feel most fully alive. And she would say that honor means nothing without love to guard it. Sarah drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, Marcus's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged settling warm and solid in her chest. The years had been kind to them. They had worked hard, loved deeply, built something lasting and true. They had survived exile and poverty, had rebuilt broken bridges with family, had raised children who knew their own worth. Most importantly, they had chosen each other, every single day for more than 2 decades. And they would continue choosing each other for as long as they both drew breath. Because that was what love meant. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though those had their place. Love meant the small, daily choice to stay, to work through problems, to support and encourage and cherish. Love meant building a life together, brick by brick, day by day, year by year. Love meant being willing to run into the frozen night with nothing but faith in each other. And love meant proving, every single day, that honor means nothing without love to guard it. The end.